David Chen. Welcome to the YouTube channel, or if you're listening to this on Patreon, patreon.com/Dave Chen. Thanks to everyone for your support. I'm gathered here today with box office extraordinaire and movie critic, as well as industry observer Scott Mendelson. Scott, thanks for chatting with me today.
It's always a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
We're here because one of the biggest phenomenon of the year at the box office is currently live and sweeping the nation, and so we really wanted to talk about. Of course,
Saw
everyone
Patrol.
knows I'm talking about Saw 10. That's what we're
Yeah,
here
yeah.
to discuss. No, I'm just joking. We are here to talk about Taylor Swift Eras Tour, and this is a concert film that opened this weekend and is breaking box office records. And so I wanted to gather together with Scott Mendelson to talk about how big of a deal this thing really is, how well we think it's doing. Before we get into this, let's just kind of talk a little bit about our own experience with the Eras Tour. Have you seen this movie yet, Scott? Or
No, my kids couldn't care less, which means there was no way I was getting out of the house for a 3-hour concert tour. Especially
uh
when now when I'm probably gonna have to find a way to get out for 4 hours next week for Killers of the Flower Moon.
huh. Well, I didn't see this movie, but I did see the Eras Tour live and in person.
Well, that's probably better.
So that's yeah, it's I don't need to see, I don't need the kind of filmed version of it. I can just experience the real thing. A huge thanks to my friend Carter for getting us all tickets for that. But yeah, heading into this, this was something that I think everyone thought would be a box office juggernaut, given how successful the actual Eras tour was. And the pre-sales were through the roof. The final amount for Taylor Swift Eras Tour at the box office this weekend is something on the order of 95 to 97 million dollars domestically. Is that correct, Scott Mendelson?
Yes, AMC released their presser, and for the first time in at least the 15 years that I've been following this stuff, where they released an estimate saying it's between this and this, which was very annoying for people making headlines for blog posts and what have you. But, if anything, it's being more cautious than what we usually see from the studios. And we'll get final figures tomorrow.
So, Scott Mendelson, I think one of the only ways of describing this as is it's a massive success, right? Like, this is a movie that people didn't even know existed 4 or 5 months ago. It is coming at a time when there is very little product out in theaters right now. Studios have pulled back on major releases this fall because of the strikes, according to them, because of the strikes. Um, so we saw movies like Dune 2 vanish from the fall calendar. So it's a very dire time in the industry. So to have something like Taylor Swift the Eras Tour really delivering for AMC and other theaters is just an unequivocal win. All that said, put this in perspective for us, Scott Mendelson. What does a 95 to 97 million dollar opening in October mean?
Well, the biggest opening weekend in the month of October, sans inflation, is Joker, which opened with 96 and change in October of 2019. So, you're sort of hedging, AMC is hedging their bets a little bit in terms of will it break the record or not, to the extent that that matters. The film got an A plus from Cinema Score. It's getting generally positive reviews, and that's not a surprise. It's a what you see is what you get kind of situation. And as a general rule, Swift is not known as an artist who cuts corners. Um, so, I mean, there was a lot of, hubbub, hand wringing. Oh, it can do 150 million. Oh, it's everything's going to change. Swift pulled a fast one on Hollywood and took it straight to the theaters, and that's a little overblown. Um, Kudos to AMC for getting this, and they're getting a little bit more of the ticket sale than they would in a conventional studio release. I think it's closer to 45% than 35%, which is sometimes the case for opening weekend for a tentpole. Um, and it's but this is a film that sells itself. What is it? It's a Taylor Swift concert film based on the Eras tour. If you know what that is, you already know what it is. So you don't need the kind of marketing machine that studios would generally bring to the table. Um, and there's a Beyonce concert tour opening on December 1st. which is another also from AMC through AMC, also a huge win for theaters. And the optimistic way of looking at this is that we could see a scenario where we do see these kind of concert films based on marquee pop stars or country stars, pop stars, rappers, whatever, musicians. Um, and even if they don't do anywhere near the business that the Taylor Swift film is going to do, they still provide semi-regular bumps at the box office that basically almost counts as found money for theaters because it's not something they were counting on in their quarterly earnings calls. Um, so yes, the film only did 95 million and only did 128 million worldwide. There were, hyperbolic chatter. It could be 150, 200 worldwide. Could do 150 domestic. Again, it's that's some of the danger of predictions that come from people that don't have any skin in the game. So you have a situation where AMC almost has to explain why, no, 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 a $95 million domestic opening weekend for a concert film that cost about $20 million and required minimal marketing is in fact a giant success. To put that into perspective, it is already the biggest grossing sans inflation concert movie of all time in just 3 days. Four if you count Thursday as its own day. Michael Jackson's This Is It made 72 million total in 2009. Justin Bieber's Never Say Never earned around 73 million in 2011. And in terms of adjusted for
But
inflation, I mean,
those were lifetime runs though, right? For those films you just named, right?
those were lifetime cubes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this is just the opening weekend.
And in
It's
terms of adjusted
already
for inflation, you were going to say.
and give or take Fahrenheit 9/11 and the couple, maybe one of the two of the Jackass movies, it's going to be the biggest grossing documentary of all time within the next few days. Um, so yeah, by any rational standard, other than again, SEO friendly. Oh my goodness, it's pre-selling better than Barbie. It's pre-selling better than Spider-Man: No Way Home. It's gonna break every record known to man. Aside from that discourse, it's a smashing, smashing success.
Yeah, and there's some chatter in the chat room about whether or not we think that here's the thing, Scott. If I don't know if you've seen some of these pirated TikToks of people in theaters singing along to this thing, but this feels like a big event movie that probably is going to have a lot of legs, right? I mean, what kind of multiple do we expect based off the fall off from Thursday through Sunday? Do you think?
I'll be honest, I do not know what the legs are going to be. This is an unprecedented event on this scale. Um, it is possible that the film is playing mostly to the converted, and I'll go into some more details on that in a minute. But it did a 2.43, 2.44 multiplier, which is very good for a film that could have easily been front loaded as all hell.
Right, right.
Um,
So to clarify, right, what you're saying is the amount it made on opening day, it made
yes,
2.43 that amount for the weekend, right?
yes, and by opening day I mean Thursday and Friday combined,
Right.
because it
And
only made 2.8 million. Yeah,
generally the higher that multiplier is, the more healthy the box office is going to be because if it's higher, that means the dollar amounts are more evenly distributed throughout the weekend, which means
yes.
people aren't just showing up for opening day; they're coming out day after day. Now, Scott, sorry, I didn't. Did you have a? I just wanted to make sure
No,
that
no,
was
no. It can
clear.
wait.
The thing to clarify is, I know people who went to go see the Eras tour like over 10 times in person, like visiting multiple cities, paying thousands of dollars in tickets to go see the Eras tour in person. I have to imagine that the repeat business on Eras tour in theaters is also going to be huge. That's my guess.
Yes.
I think we're going to see at least 2.5 to 3x multiplier off this opening weekend is my guess. It will be an event
Yeah.
thing that people go to, like people bring their friends they go to the theater for many, many times and experience together in the vein of other collective events that we have had this year and in recent memory. So you're saying it's an unprecedented event. If I had to guess, right, uh, it's very possible this thing's headed to 2 or 250 at least. Like that feels within the realm of
Oh
possibility.
yeah.
What do you think?
No, no. After this opening weekend, I think 200's a lock. 250 is seems plausible. Again, unless it takes a Harry Potter and Deathly Hollows type drop. Part two. Um, because the kind of film this is, it's what I like to call a demographically specific event film. That means that you have this film that exists to cater to an existing fan base, an active fan base, a passionate fan base, a fan base that otherwise is not going to show up in the theaters anyway. So again, to theaters, this is almost free money. Now, other examples just in the last few years, anime pictures like Demon Slayer, the movie, grindhouse horror films like Terrifier 2, faith-based dramas like Christmas with the Chosen, and yes, Indian action spectacles like RRR and Pathan that make 10 to 20 million dollars domestically. Demon Slayer made 49, but I digress. Um, and they sometimes are a little front loaded and they don't necessarily play to the unconverted. And that's fine. Because they're budgeted accordingly. And for larger examples, I would say that this applies to the later sequels to the Twilight films and the Harry Potter films. That by the time you get to the series finales, you're mostly playing to the fans, the people that are absolutely going to be there. And what tends to happen in a healthy marketplace is those films make a gajillion dollars while everything else in the marketplace does fine and acts like they're not there because you're not impacting anyone that otherwise would have bought a ticket for some other picture. Ergo, in late 2012, the Twilight Saga Breaking Dawn makes $830 million worldwide. And right as that's happening, Lincoln does 275, Skyfall does 1.1 billion, Hobbit Unexpected Journey does $1 billion because the business accrued by the Twilight finale is business that otherwise would not have gone to the movies at all. So it's these specific event films are operating in a vacuum. And yes, sometimes there is some bleed over, for lack of a better word, where you do end up reaching the unconverted. And that's probably what happened with Sound of Freedom to a certain extent, where that film became a huge, huge deal, well beyond the people that would have shown up for a normal Angel Studios distributed picture. So, there are two scenarios here, both of which are positive. Because when you have a $96 million opening weekend, there are no bad scenarios here. Hold on a second. I apologize. Yes. Can I borrow for like 10 seconds? I apologize. Hold on a second.
Okay, I mean, we are broadcasting live, but hey everyone, how's it going? um,
Hold on. I have to sing happy birthday to my mother-in-law. So hold on a second. I'm going to put this on mute. I'm going to go do that and I'm going to come right back.
okay, sounds great. It really would have been great if Scott had let me know in advance, that's a thing that was going to happen. But people in the chat room are saying leave it on. Yeah, I don't have a choice. Okay, I'm not going to stop this broadcast and then start it over again. All right. Do not mute. Yes, we should have told Scott do not mute. And it wouldn't be a Scott Mendelson video if something like this didn't happen. But I hope Scott's mother-in-law is having a good birthday. I honestly wouldn't have agreed to do this broadcast if I knew that he was doing it during her birthday party. That's a true fact. That's a true fact. Um, Joy in the chat room is saying Scott's cord management rivals ours. Yes, you can see he's got a bunch of cords plugged into his thing, and then a lamp that's just shining what seems to be directly into the camera. So good times. Good times. Really feels like the wait. Oh, and he's back now. Hello, Scott. You back?
Hi. Okay. So yes.
Hey! Next time we do a broadcast, if it's during your mother-in-law's birthday party, just tell me, and then we won't do the broadcast.
That's why I tried to do it this morning, but your computer wouldn't let my microphone work.
Oh yes, no. Blame my computer, Scott, for your.
I'm
microphone
going to this
not
time
working.
because I spent 2 months testing it before making another one of these. Inside joke, folks.
What is Scott is alluding to the fact that we spent 40 minutes trying to broadcast this morning, and it did not work. But we're back now, so that's what's most important. Okay, so Scott, I think that what is notable, right, is first a couple things to note. First of all, somebody in the chat room pointed out that Taylor Swift the Eras Tour is only playing during the weekends. So it's not playing during weekdays. You can only get tickets Thursday, Friday,
Mm,
Saturday, and Sunday, which I think is also another weird wrinkle in this. You know what I mean? So that will
is that
impact.
true?
It's true. When I go on Fandango, you cannot buy tickets during Monday, Tuesday, and
Wow.
Wednesday. So yeah,
Well, that certainly,
so that'll impact box office a little
yeah,
bit probably, uh,
yeah,
but I think what that does is it further cements this as an event film. Like you can only get
yes,
tickets on these days, so you have to go when like everyone else is going, and it's making sure that there's going to be big crowds in the theaters, which I think is going to be significant.
yeah. Because I mean, it is a crowd picture. It's.
Um,
I imagine if you watch it by yourself on a Tuesday morning, it's not quite the same.
Joy also says, so people in the chat room also pointing out a few things. Brian says, it's more expensive than a normal screening. So
This
like
is true.
there's the theaters are taking, you said probably a little bit extra money off the top, and also the amount is higher. Um, Also, Joy points out that T Swift has a super strong merch game. There was like a
Hmm.
popcorn bundle that you could buy for $20. And if you're going to a Taylor Swift concert, a popcorn bundle for $20 is like very reasonable.
Hmm.
And so therefore going to a theater, a $20 popcorn bundle is like, oh, that's a bargain, you know? And so I think,
When
yeah, but basically like like it all adds up to like a very attractive proposition for AMC in the theaters. Like between the higher
yes,
prices, the event nature of it, the fact that she's doing merch tie-ins that are gonna get people to open their wallets even more, just feels like a big win for everyone involved. Yeah.
yes, it really is. And for what it's worth, to my knowledge, you can't use AMC A List or any of, and it's not just Regal Unlimited or what have you. You actually have to buy the ticket, which isn't that unusual. I mean, when I went to see RRR on opening day in IMAX, I could not use my Regal Unlimited, and it cost me $30, which whatever, money well spent. Um, so yeah, every it's that is part of the appeal is you do have this cross promotional merchandise opportunity where when you've paid $20 for your ticket instead of what 300, 500, a million, it depends on how badly you get scalped on Ticketmaster, then spending $20 for a popcorn is no big deal.
Yeah.
Um,
Also,
so yeah,
Daniel Cabral says tickets for Taylor Swift here in the UK are 2x, even 3x normal ticket prices, which blew my curiosity to see it. Uh, so Scott, the opening weekend of Taylor Swift's Eras Tour was around 95, 97 million. One of the most successful October openings ever, second only to Joker. I think you said right.
for now, we'll see what the
For now,
final figures come in.
yeah. I think it is worth noting what movies it is likely Taylor Swift is going to do better than this year. Now,
Pretty much opening weekend, basically everything.
oh really? So let's assume conservative estimate, Scott. Let's say Taylor Swift Eras Tour makes 180 million domestic, right? That's
Oh, you
pretty.
mean total?
Yeah,
Yes.
total. That's pretty conservative, right?
Sorry, I was thinking
If
opening weekend, but yes.
no, if that's true, Taylor Swift the Eras Tour is going to beat the following films: Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, 174. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning Part 1, Transformers: Rise of the Beast, Creed 3, Elemental, Fast 10, Scream 6, Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem, and The Flash.
But
Uh,
not John Wick Chapter 4.
that's true. That's true. Now it very well could be
Also
John
enough
Wick
Sound
Chapter
of
4.
Freedom.
So if it makes 190
Yeah.
or 200, it will beat John Wick Chapter 4 and Sound of Freedom, and will be one of the top 10 films of 2023 domestic grosses. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And as far as opening weekend, the only film that unless I'm missing something, the only film that I see coming on the horizon that has a shot in hell is The Marvels,
The Marvels. Yeah,
Captain Marvel 2.
yeah.
And yeah, the tracking is not great so far, but they've got time. It hasn't been screened, yada, yada, yada. And even Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, which even coming off terrible reviews and frankly ho hum buzz that was accurate, that's still open with about 110 over its 4-day opening weekend.
Well,
And
Scott,
100 and change over its 3-day.
I guess you're not really betting strong on Aquaman, huh?
Oh, I'm betting
Aquaman and
Aquaman's gonna leg out to $1 billion in North America alone. No, I'm
but you're
kidding.
just talking about opening
But
weekend.
no, no, opening weekend. I mean, the first Aquaman opened with $72 million in mid-December.
Yeah.
But because, and December legs are amazing, as you know, because Avatar, Lord of the Rings, Titanic, et cetera, et cetera. The film legged out to 335 domestic from a 72 opening weekend. And even by December standards, that's amazing. That was the leggiest live action big deal comic book superhero movie since Tim Burton's Batman, which is one reason why I think I may be the only person on earth that's bullish on Aquaman. I still believe. Um, hashtag I believe in James Wan.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah,
All right.
opening weekend wise, yeah, I can't think of anything other than Marvels that's going to come anywhere near this.
Esther C in the chat says, "Is 97 million a disappointment? Some analysts were predicting much more this weekend." I think you already covered this, but Scott, why don't you just give the definitive answer? Is $97 million a disappointment for this film?
No,
Yeah.
no,
Okay.
I mean it's completely fine to say, oh, it might do 110, it might do 120, maybe it'll do 100, but the number itself is spectacular, even
Yeah.
if it wasn't as quite as big as some of the hype led it to be. And there's reasons for that. I mean, maybe it was, I don't know if you remember this, but when the Phantom Menace opened in 1999 with only 105 million in 5 days, which was a record, but it was less than a lot of people were expecting. One of the reasons was like, well, there was like 5 weeks of nonstop news reports saying that every theater would be sold out. A lot of people just said, we'll do it next weekend.
Yeah. I
And
think
they did.
the legs on this thing will be shocking. I think
Yeah.
this movie is going to come down. I'm going to put it out there. I'm going to say under 30% next weekend. I'm just going to throw that out there. Like it will be under 30% drop for next weekend. Maybe it's going to be closer to 40%. We'll see. But like I think under 30% drop next weekend. So
I'm
we'll
gonna
see. We'll
look
see.
up a comparison that comes to mind, which is the wide release of American Sniper. That film opened with 109 over 4 days, legged out to 350.
Yeah.
I know it had a really strong hold weekend too, but I don't remember exactly what it was. And since numbers is being slow, someone in the chat box will have to provide. But anyway, best case scenario, I'm thinking American Sniper.
Yeah. Let's see. American Sniper second weekend drop. Let's see if domestically American Sniper fell just 28%
There you
in its
go.
second weekend, the best hold ever for a movie opening to more than $85 million.
Yeah, that sounds
So
about right.
I don't know what has transpired since then, but I do wonder if if Taylor Swift the Eras Tour will come in with an under 28% hold for second weekend. Feels
It
very
certainly
possible. Feels very
could.
possible is what I'm going to say.
Because
So
again, you got an A+ from Cinema Score.
yeah,
Nobody is leaving unhappy. So, and yes, I do think there will be some repeat business. You are absolutely right. And
yeah,
I imagine the positive hype is going to convert at least a few people, especially if they're in a group of friends that, hey, we've already seen this. It's great. Come with us, to tag along. And there's not that much coming out over the next few weeks. I mean, Killers of the Flower Moon is like a weird one because it's a 3.5 hour, super dark historical crime thriller, but it also stars Leonardo DiCaprio, who
yeah.
is the last unmitigated pure movie star we've got left.
People, I saw a prediction of between 20 and 24 for that opening weekend, which
That's fair.
yeah,
And again, but it could leg out because
yeah, it could.
DiCaprio makes good
It could
movies.
be the Oppenheimer of this winter, basically.
Yeah, yeah.
In terms of a 3
Because
plus hour
there's
long film
not
talkie.
much on the. I
Yeah,
think Five Nights at Freddy's is the only thing on the 28th.
yeah,
Which that has a fan base, to be fair. Um, and I'm kind of hoping that breaks out, whether it's good or bad, because that is an IP that's relatively recent and it's popular to the kids of today, not people my age. So that's always heartening. Um, and then Dune was supposed to come out on the 3rd. Now it's not. And then you've got the Marvels on the 10th. You have the Hunger Games Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes on the 17th. You have Disney's Wish on Thanksgiving weekend. And then you've got Beyonce's concert film on December 1st. So there's a lot of room to breathe for this picture.
absolutely.
Um,
All right. Well, those are some thoughts on Taylor Swift Eras Tour, but I think we're both impressed by this, and Pundits be damned. If you're listening to this, then you care about our opinion, and we think it's great. So
Yeah,
that's all we have to say about that. Now, for old time's sake, let's run down the other 5 films in the top 5. Scott Mendelson. But
sure.
I do also want to mention that Scott and I continue to look for opportunities to work together, and I'm hoping that there will be more of these broadcasts in the future. We'll see. Still a lot TBD. Anyway, let's talk about the other movies that were out at the theater this weekend. Exorcist: The Believer dropped 58% to reach a total of $48.6 million. This was a relatively low budget movie. Even though it is not very well critically reviewed, it's still doing very well at the box office. Feels like a big success for a movie that not that many people I know actually enjoyed. What do you think, Scott Mendelson?
In a vacuum, you'd be absolutely correct. The film cost around 30 million to make. It's made 84 worldwide so far, and 58% for a horror film that generally most people didn't like is pretty good. The caveat is that 2 years ago, NBC Universal paid about $400 million for the rights to
Yeah.
make this Exorcist trilogy. Now that includes production budget, talent buyouts, streaming, licensing. So Halloween Horror Nights, mazes, stuff like that. So it's the whole kit and caboodle, but it does change the math in terms of is this a success or not. And it's complicated because I'm not going to say I thought it was a good idea 2 years ago, but I can understand why they did it. This was a few months after Netflix had dropped $500 million on Knives Out sequels just for spite. And it was sort of a way of saying, we can play that game too. And it was a sign to Wall Street that Comcast was going to take Peacock seriously, and that it might theoretically be on the same level as Max and Disney Plus and what have you. And
But
it was also during a
the world
time,
has changed a lot since those rights were
very
acquired.
much in early 2022, Wall Street changed its mind
Yeah.
on a whim, saying, no, 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 we don't want content spends and subscription numbers anymore. We want profits and revenue. And if you spend 2 to 3 years listening to us, spending ungodly amounts of money on content, well, up yours. Too bad.
Yeah. So in a vacuum, $48.6 million is great for a second weekend for Exorcist the Believer, but $400 million to spend on rights is a staggering sum.
Yes.
And this is not the runaway success I think they had hoped for. So
No.
yeah.
The good news is they're Universal. They can afford it.
Yeah.
Oppenheimer has made $950 million worldwide. Super Mario Brothers has made 1.4 billion worldwide. Um, they'll be okay.
Yeah. Paw Patrol 2 came in at number 3, dropping 38% in its third weekend for a total of $49.9 million. Again, not much to say about this other than, hey, family films do.
$126 million worldwide on like a 30 million budget. This is a big hit. This is a viable franchise. This could have easily been a people were just curious the first time kind of deal.
Yeah.
But this is doing better than the first one, more or less. And there has been a third one already greenlit. Hopefully they'll do what they should have done this time and just remake The Dark Knight, where Mayor Humdinger, having gotten his ass kicked by Chase in the first film, is desperate and panics and hires animals that he can't control, i.e. the mischievous kittens, and realizes that some cats, or some animals, like cats, don't care about money or power. Some cats just want to watch the world burn.
Beautifully done, Scott. And yeah, it turns out people weren't just paw curious the first time around. There was actually the franchise actually delivered the goods. So
Indeed.
$49.9 million, doing pretty well. All right. Number 4, one of my favorite films of the year, Saw 10, dropping 27% in its third weekend to generate $41.4 million. What's exciting about this, Scott, is that this is not just doing well for any horror film. It's one of the best performing Saw films, of the last 10 years, basically, right? Like it's doing, it shows that there's still juice left in this thing. I thought after Saw the final chapter, which is also known as Saw 3D, Jigsaw, Spiral from the Book of Saw, I thought like this franchise is over. It's dead. There's no way this is coming back, which would have been fine with me. Like I've already seen enough Saw films for a lifetime. But Saw 10 comes in. It's actually a great Saw film, and it made $41.4 million in its third weekend, or total $41.4 million. Tobin Bell is going to be playing Jigsaw until he's 120 years old. What do you think, Scott?
I think if there's any conversations about getting rights to Saw 10 or Saw 3D, the vocal likeness of somebody past their death,
Yeah.
I assume Lionsgate is giving Tobin Bell a dump truck full of gold.
Yes. Yes.
And it would be worth
Tobin
it.
Bell, you and your descendants will never want for food or shelter again if we can keep using Jigsaw's voice for all time, you know? And
Yes. What I think is interesting about this picture's performance is that the legs are insane for a Saw film, even
mhm.
any Saw sequel, basically.
Saw
It
movies
just
are
shows
notoriously
that
very front loaded, right? Like in
yes,
general. Yeah.
partially because the continuity is so bonkers bananas that it's harder for newbies to show up. And again, that's one of the appeals of the
Yes,
franchise. That
absolutely.
the geez, the pinball continuity makes the Fast and the Furious look coherent.
Yes.
Um, and but what's happening with this film, I think it's twofold. I think it's gaining some momentum as we get closer to Halloween. And in that sense, releasing it in late September turned out to be a smart play. And B, I think the strong reviews and the solid buzz, and the fact that it's basically a sequel to the first Saw, you don't have to have seen the other ones, is getting folks that either have not seen a Saw film or jumped off the bandwagon like 15 years ago into the theater.
Yeah.
And that is really cool.
I went to
Um,
see Saw in a theater. You know, I paid. I didn't pay. I use AMC A list, but you know, I used one of my A list credits on Saw 10, and I loved that movie. It was a great time. You know, and I hadn't seen a Saw movie in theaters possibly ever. Possibly ever. I don't think I've ever seen a Saw movie in theaters. Oh, I saw Saw 6 in theaters.
the good
Um,
one,
yeah, that was not a bad one. That was not a bad one.
same director.
Yeah, yeah,
And
Kevin Grutech
I've
or something, right?
joked
Yeah,
that
yeah.
he got the job purely from the last 15 years of me telling everybody that Saw 6 is awesome.
I think I'm a
Um,
little bit bummed because Darren Lynn Bousman made Saw 2 and 3, I believe.
and
Uh,
4.
and he did 4, yeah, yeah. And those were all very successful movies.
Yes.
And he also directed Spiral from the Book of Saw, and that movie was basically a box office bomb. And
On a COVID curve, but yes. Yes.
but it
I don't
was
think it
bummer
would have
because
been that
Darren Lynn
much
Bousman,
better.
I think, is largely responsible for Saw surviving as a franchise. And so I was hoping
Yes,
he could get a win, in there because the only reason Saw's still around, I think, is because of Darren Lynn Bousman. So, um,
yes, he's the Nicholas Myers of the Saw franchise. He
Jeff
set the
Kane,
template for the franchise with the sequels.
exactly, yeah. Jeff Kane says, "Is it worth seeing Saw 10 blind if I've never seen a new Saw before?" First of all,
Sure.
interesting phrasing. Secondly, I think I would watch Saw 1 first, honestly. But I think if you see Saw 1, you can just skip all the way to Saw 10 and you'll be fine. Like, if you
Although, I
really
mean,
want
I
to
would
do it, if
love
you really want to do it right, you should see Saw 1 and 2, and then see Saw 10. Like
yeah, I would
that
agree
is a
with
very
that.
solid plan to see in terms of Saw
Um,
viewing. Yeah.
although I would love to see how Saw 10 plays to somebody that has very little knowledge of the franchise. Because really for the first act, unless what happens in the second act is almost a surprise. Um,
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that's true. Yeah. So anyway, love me some Saw, and Saw 10 is a great example of it. Okay,
this is
final.
a shockingly pleasant surprise.
All right, Scott. I have gotten a few pings from people being like, "Hey, I wish you were still doing these box office things with Scott Mendelson, because I want to hear what Scott thinks about The Creator." The Creator came in fifth this weekend at the box office in its third weekend, generating $4 million. That's a 31% drop. It now has a domestic total of $32.4 million. Now, this movie was relatively cheap. It cost around $80 million to produce, even though it looks like it cost $300 million to produce.
Yes.
It looks better than Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. It looks better than The Flash. Those are
Paw
both
Patrol
movies.
looks better than never mind.
It looks better than Paw Patrol. Those are. It looks better than movies that cost $200 million more than The
Yeah.
Creator. And so, at the end of the day, it's not going to be a huge success, but maybe it's not going to be a catastrophe either. Scott, what do you think of The Creator's $32.4 million gross in
I
weekend
mean,
three?
it's made approximately 80 million worldwide on an
Yeah.
80 budget. So you're already halfway in the hole before you count for marketing. That being said, this was a distributor deal. Disney's only on the hook for distribution fees. It was a Regency picture. And There is something to be said, and this is something I've talked about a lot over the years with films like Valerian and Alita, even Jupiter Ascending, these original or new to you adaptations that aren't necessarily box office hits, but they're going to have longer legs over a lifetime and more value to the library than like the latest remake of Point Break or the latest revamp of The Kingsman that nobody wanted to see. So
Very,
I
very
do
possibly the
think,
creator is going to be huge when it hits streaming or video on demand, right? And like,
to the extent that what huge looks like, and we're still
yeah,
kind of in the dark about that. But I do think over the long run, there is still value in making these original or new to you pictures of this scale if you can afford it, because you're Disney, and if you can't afford that, then you're doing something else wrong. Um, because those are the kind of films that provide long-term value to your library. And those are the kind of films that become, cult favorites over the years. People will talk about, 10 years from now, people will talk about, hey, I saw that movie Alita in theaters and I really liked it. Or remember that Valerian movie that was really cool? Again, nobody's going to say that about, the latest reboot, remake, whatever that nobody wanted.
right, right,
Um, but that's more of a long range existential conversation.
yeah,
But logically speaking, there's no way this film was going to be a hit in 2023. 4 years ago, in pre-COVID, pre-rush to streaming times, uh, Christ, I just forgot the name of the movie. Ad Astra with Brad Pitt
yeah.
pulled about similar numbers, and that was another film that got rave reviews. It was a strong original picture from a known auteur that film nerds know and like, but to the regular audiences, they're like, no, no. It's that there was a time when a movie like Gravity could break out, but 10 years later, I think that was sort of false hope.
To be fair, the creator is no Gravity. But
Oh no, Gravity's one of my favorite films in the
yeah,
last 20
yeah,
years.
yeah. Anyway,
Um, but no, I think it's doing as well as it can be expected. And I think as long as everybody went in there with their eyes open and wasn't expected to pull, Martian numbers, then whatever. Oh no, there won't be a sequel. I don't want a sequel. I don't need a sequel. This one film is pretty good. And I hope that cooler heads will prevail in terms of, the next kind of movie like this, that it goes to theaters instead of streaming. Because again, I do think there is value in these kind of big, go for broke, original or new to you franchise tentpole type films, even in a world where they are commercially questionable at best.
amen to that, sir. All right, Scott, I think we can wrap it up there. The tech gods were fine to us today.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful to have broadcast with you successfully once more. I want to give a huge shout out to my patrons at patreon.com/Dave Chen for making my work possible. If you're watching this or listening to this and you're a patron, it's because of you that I can continue to do what I do online. I want to say thank you to Scott Mendelson. Scott, why don't you tell people where they can find more of your work on the internet?
I write at therap.com, and my random musings and pontifications are still on X and Blue Sky. I'm trying to use Blue Sky more.
Yeah, I'm enjoying Scott's work over at Blue Sky. Happy birthday to Scott's mother-in-law. Do you want to? There is a request for you to sing "Happy Birthday" to your mother-in-law for us here in the chat.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to Cheryl Marcus. Happy birthday to you.
And many
Smash that
more.
subscribe button.
All right. Thanks for watching and listening. See you guys later. Bye.